Our opening words are from Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. How can I enter into dialogue if I always project ignorance onto others and never perceive my own? How can I enter into dialogue if I am closed to and even offended by the contribution of others? At the point of encounter, there are neither yet ignoramuses nor perfect sages. There are only people who are attempting together to learn more than they now know. morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kathleen Coate. I serve as the chair of the Board of Trustees here at MVUUF. Our worship team today is Richard Duffin, back from Florida, on tech, Lark Lewis on piano, Nicole Collins is our music director, Director of Music Ministries. And our song leaders today are Karen Olson, Angie Tangen, and Jody Gray. Yes, we invite you all to join us for social hour downstairs after the service today. Team Purple is in charge of hospitality today. And by the way, our hospitality teams serve as ushers, greeters, social hour hosts on a rotating schedule. Serving on a hospitality team is a great way to get involved in the community. If you'd like to serve on a hospitality team, talk to Patrick Westcott. Patrick, there, yeah, okay. We want to especially welcome anyone visiting for the first time today. There are visitor packets and a visitor form to fill out downstairs in the entryway, which can help you navigate your way in our community. Folks joining us online can find the visitor form in the chat or comment section. For our chalice lighting today, we will review our something that we talked about at our annual meeting in May of 2021. Our members voted to add an 8th principle for this congregation to affirm and promote, along with the 7 principles held by the Unitarian Universalist Association, of which we are a part. We recite these words this morning as a reminder of our commitment to our 8th principle. Will you please join me in the words for lighting our chalice? We, the members of the Minnesota Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Bloomington, Minnesota, covenant to affirm and promote journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other forms of oppression in ourselves and our institutions. Please join in singing our opening hymn, number 153, Woke Up This Morning with My Mind.
A quick note about this hymn. Reverend Osby of Aurora, Illinois, created this revamp of an old gospel song, I Woke Up This Morning with My Mind Stayed on Jesus, while spending time in Hinds County Jail during the Freedom Rides. It was then spread and became a signature song of the civil rights movement. So while it might have roots as spiritual, it's also a song of the civil rights movement.
Stay
Wow. Awesome, thank you. Each time we gather, we set aside time to lift up the joys and sorrows of this community. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. If you have something to share and you are here in person, you can raise your hand and an usher will bring a microphone to you. If you are on Zoom, you can write in the chat, and folks on YouTube can share in the comment section. Are there any joys and sorrows to lift up today?
I've got a joy to share, which is that my youngest baby turned 17 yesterday, and I cannot get over that they just keep getting older. Next month is my oldest baby turns 20, and it's also that moment where I'm like, how did I get old enough to have kids? So that's my joy. I'm glad to have celebrated with her yesterday.
I have a joy and a concern. My son is joining the U of M music program this fall as a senior in high school. And my concern is for my daughter, who is having some struggles as a 14-year-old.
Hi, my name is Angelica, and I always get so nervous when I grab the microphone, but I'm like, why if, like, you are my people, so. My joy is I've gone through so much darkness in the past where I couldn't even see the light and even like try to look for it, but now I've gone through so much healing inside that I'm at a stage where I'm like opening up and actually helping people.
Do we have anything on Zoom? Okay. Oh, Richard, yes.
Yes, I wanted to thank one of our fabulous team members, Kathleen Coate, for the last 6 weeks.
I did my best. We're glad to have you back. We lift up what has been offered in this space alongside those joys and sorrows that remain in our hearts. Will you please join me in our sung response? Here are a few announcements about upcoming events this week. Yoga meets this Monday and Wednesday at 4 p.m. on Zoom. The link is in the February newsletter or in the weekly Friday email. Choir practice is also on Wednesday. Talk to Nicole after the service if you would like to be a part of our musical programming. All are welcome. On Thursday, men's group, which meets at 7 p.m. on Zoom, will meet, and their speaker will be Alejandro Nakpil, an Electric Mobility Program Associate at the Great Plains Institute, which facilitates Drive Electric Minnesota. Alejandro will discuss the benefits and challenges of adopting electric vehicles in Minnesota. You can also find that Zoom link in the Unison newsletter, which you can always find on the website. Saturday night is a community night. We're going to be singing for Veep, bringing collections, which you can start doing anytime after today, paper products, diapers, toilet paper, put them downstairs in the lobby. We'll collect them there, or just bring them on Saturday. We're going to sing love songs for the February love theme. Find more information again in the FIDA email that starts at 5 o'clock on Saturday. For our Sunday sharing offering this month, we will be contributing part of our funds to the MVUUF Scholarship Fund for Camp Unistar. We have many families and youth who attend Camp Unistar every summer, which is up north. I want to say a few personal words about this. My daughter went to Camp Unistar for the first time when she was about to enter seventh grade. They call them sevies at the camp. And she was very nervous, very awkward at that age, terrified to get on the bus with only one other person that she knew. When she came home a week later, she cried for hours because she did not want to leave. She said, that was the best week of my life. And for the next 5 years, she referred to it as the best week of her year, every year. She could not wait to go as a senior because the seniors are somewhat gods during Youth Week. However, that was the summer of 2020, so she missed out on her senior year, but she still has lifelong friends that she made. So raise your hand if you've ever been to Camp Unistar. Yeah, several of you. So talk to the folks who have their hands raised because it is a magical place from what I understand. I still haven't been there. All of my energy was spent going towards her attendance. So we were very grateful for the scholarship fund that allowed her to be able to do that for an entire week and be fed and taken care of on that beautiful island. So will the ushers please come forward to take the offering? As some of you know, I work at Normandale College. One of my absolute favorite colleagues is with us here today, Dan Darling. Dan, you may not remember this, but about 12 years ago, I attended a faculty development session that you were a part of, and I have never forgotten it. I think you spoke for 10 minutes. So that's what you're in for, folks. Dan Darling is a writer and educator. He received the award for the most innovative instructor during his first year of graduate school, followed by outstanding teaching assistant at the University of New Mexico, where he earned his Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. Following teaching stints at Grinnell College and Winona State University, Dan arrived at Normandale Community College, where he received the Board of Trustees Outstanding Educator Award and now serves as the chair of the English department. His first novel, Archaeopteryx, was a finalist for the New Mexico-Arizona Book Award. Dan speaks 4 languages, has traveled to 20 countries, and has worked as a circus performer, bartender, IRS agent, and magician. All of his successes as an educator should be pinned on the lapel of Paulo Freire, who inspires every pedagogical decision Dan has ever made. Welcome, Dan Darling.
Thank you, Kathleen. Is this thing on? Thank you, Kathleen. Kathleen's also one of my favorite colleagues. Is this thing working, Richard? It is. Okay, we're good. Thank you so much for welcoming me. This place is beautiful. There's so much good energy in this room. I just feel very happy, which is why it makes me a little sad that I have to change our plans. Instead of talking about Paulo Freire, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you to juggle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate and I'm going to lecture at you about juggling for half an hour. If you cannot do it after half an hour of watching me, you are going to be in big trouble. How does that sound? Does it sound like you're going to learn to juggle? Why?
Based on fear and threats.
Great. Yes. So it's based on fear and threats. I have power, and I'm trying to dominate y'all into doing what I want, right? That doesn't help people learn usually. And you said something else. Will you share that with us?
We're not doing it. We're just watching.
Right. We learn by doing, right? Better than by watching. Let me pose another thing to you. Sadly, I'm done juggling. What if I get up here and teach you about literature by telling you about all my favorite books? And you listen to what I like, and at the end of 30 minutes, you're going to understand literature better. How do you feel about that? Why don't you like that?
It's all about your interests.
Yeah, it's all about me, my interests. Well, what's wrong with me? I'm all right. Yeah, not you. We're all different, right? And so the juggling thing is about like, hey, we have to learn by doing ourselves, right? That's the best way to learn. The literature thing poses an even deeper problem from my perspective because what comes in literature? Well, values, culture, religion, right? So if I'm telling you, you have to like the books I like, chances are there's a lot of culture and values that come along with that. And so in a way, I'm letting my culture dominate yours. Does this make sense? Yeah, so this was a great concern of Paulo Freire. Can the camera see me okay, Richard, if I go over here? Sweet. So this is a great concern of Paulo Freire. He was born in the 20s in Brazil, not the 2020s, the 1920s, in Brazil, in a town called Recife. And what he discovered, he grew up during the Great Depression. And what he discovered was that most of the teachers, they came from the big cities. They were of a particular socioeconomic level. They were mostly of European descent. They had a particular religion. And what they did is they came into schools and taught people who were not like them, who were not from the same background. And they sort of imposed those big city values on those people, imposed those Eurocentric values on people, imposed those linguistic, cultural, religious values on the people they were teaching out in the rural areas, the small towns, the villages. And Paulo Freire said, this ain't right. He didn't like it. And so what he wanted to do is come up with a different way of thinking about teaching. I'm sure we've all been in a room where lecture was the model, right? The teacher stands up in front of the room and lectures. Have you all been in this situation before? Sometimes you get great lectures and you laugh and you have fun and maybe you learn a lot. Sometimes the opposite is true. And in Paulo Freire's day, that was the way you taught. We had a teacher in front of the classroom who lectured at the students, and the students were supposed to absorb that information. This is called the banking method of pedagogy. Can we go to that slide, please, Richard? Thanks, pal. Yeah. Here's a picture of the banking method. This teacher is pouring orange juice into all of their fish bowls, and this girl up front says, if it is not orange, it is not real. But this is what Paulo Freire thought that sort of teaching was like. It's called the banking method because I'm the teacher, I have all the wealth. Wealth is knowledge. And you have no wealth at all. You have no knowledge. And all I have to do, boop, is fill you up with my knowledge. And if I talk to you for a couple hours, hopefully that'll just fill you up with my knowledge, and then you're going to be smart. Does this make sense? So the problem is then we start to see only orange. We see only what the teacher sees. Let me ask you all a question. If I'm your teacher, let's pretend. Let's pretend I'm your teacher. Do you come into the room with any knowledge? Do you come in the room with any of your own ideas? Do you come into the room with any of your own culture, values, religion, ancestors, language? You guys got it all. That's great. Yes. So what Paulo Freire thought is it's flawed to think that one person holds all the knowledge in a room, right? Probably students come in with a lot to offer, and we need to set up a dynamic where that is possible. And so what he thought is, we should come up with a new system. So he wrote this gorgeous book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Has anybody read it? Did you like it?
I loved it.
Did you like it, Kathleen? Yeah. Tell me why you loved it, if you don't mind.
Because it turned everything on its head.
Yeah.
And you could engage more with your students. It wasn't all about you. It wasn't sage.
Ooh, I like that. That rhymes. Yeah, not sage on the stage, but what's the other part?
Guide on the side.
Guide on the side, yes. That puts it in a nutshell. In fact, I think I'm done here. I think you did really good. So Paulo Freire came up with this idea, which he expressed in his book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And if you're going to read any part of it, I think chapter 2 is the best. It really goes over this system pretty well. Get on my ear. Come on, stay on there. So I want to break it down to you into 3 different parts. The name of his system varies a lot. So sometimes people call it liberation pedagogy, some people call it dialogic pedagogy, some people call it revolutionary pedagogy, some people call it problem-solving pedagogy. And to me, a lot of times we hear these terms used interchangeably. But as I've thought about this over the last 15 or so years, more like 20 years that I've been thinking about this. It's been a while. These names have separated into different aspects of the pedagogical system. What does pedagogy mean, by the way? I heard somebody talking about that out in the atrium. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Yeah, hit me. Teaching. Yeah, it's teaching methods, right? It's way of teaching, methodology of teaching. Thank you for that. Yeah, so also I should get out my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm so excited I forgot to do that. So, yes. So let me just run by I think we got all the problems with the banking pedagogy, but before we get into the solution to banking pedagogy, one of the problems is that it reifies social, racial, cultural, gender hierarchies. Because a lot of the times, the teachers of a particular race, oftentimes a particular gender identity, oftentimes a sociocultural background, and so it imposes that as a sort of hegemony on the classroom in banking pedagogy, which we don't like, right? We don't like hegemonies in here. Another thing it does is, if we think about it, it isolates and disempowers students. Because let's say that I'm Dan Darling, which I am, and I'm sitting in a classroom and Kathleen is teaching me something about theater, and I'm supposed to be quiet and listen to her. If I don't understand a concept, and I'm not supposed to challenge the teacher, and I'm not supposed to talk to my neighbor, because if I do, I get in trouble, what is there left for me but to sit in my misunderstanding and feel bad about myself? And if this builds up over long enough, why do we think students hate school? Because they feel alienated, they feel disempowered, they feel uncared for, don't you think? This is a natural byproduct of the banking system. Yes, so, and one more thing, and then I'll go on. I want to check on the time to make sure we're doing okay. Okay, we're doing okay. We're doing great. Another thing about the banking system is, if I'm expected to sit passively at a desk and listen, does that cultivate leadership? Do we want leaders in our society? I love asking easy questions. Yes, we need leaders, right? That's what we want school to do. But the way we've structured some of our classes does the opposite. Have you been in a workplace? Anybody in here ever had a job? Yeah, that's good. How many of you in your jobs had to work collaboratively with others? Almost in every job you have to do that. We need team building skills. We need collaborative skills. We need leadership skills to survive in this workplace, to thrive in this workplace, don't you think? Sitting passively while a teacher tells me what's right and what's wrong, that doesn't cultivate any of that. So especially if I'm punished for challenging the teacher, I'm punished for speaking to my neighbor, this is not good practice. So what we want to do is we want to do a few things. I'm going to run through 3 different aspects of Freire's pedagogy that I'd like us to ponder. The first is called problem-solving pedagogy. Right on the mark. Thanks so much. So problem-solving pedagogy says, hey, instead of having the teacher lecture at the students, why doesn't the teacher give them some tools, some ways to think, and then put them in groups and let them solve problems together? So instead of having everybody facing the teacher, we put students facing each other, working on a problem together. It could be a math problem. It could be a chemistry lab. It could be a philosophical question. It could be a writing prompt. It could be any of these things. But when students can work together, it does many things that are good, I think. And if you come up with one that I don't, please just raise your hand and let me know. But one of the things it does is it allows us to learn actively, right? So that instead of listening to somebody, we are doing stuff. And that helps us learn better, I think. Another thing it does is it teaches us those collaborative skills. It teaches us to work with others. It teaches us to form natural leadership capabilities in small, low-stakes situations, right? If I'm thrown as a leader, when I was, I think I was 24, I was made the manager of a cafe, and I had no managerial experience. I had no leadership experience or skills. How did I do as a manager? Bad. But yes, you're right, I did pretty bad. But if we give students these chances to practice this stuff in low-stakes situations, it means that they're ready to try it in higher stakes situations. So if every day we put people in small groups and we let them work together, they're going to develop these skills and feel good about them as they grow, right? I think so anyway. One of the other things that it does is, remember how I said earlier that in the banking classroom where the teacher lectures and you're supposed to take it all in, you're afraid to ask questions if you don't understand anything? Well, studies show that when students are working together collaboratively, they sort of answer each other's questions. So if a student doesn't understand something, the peers help them out and they sort of understand better together. And then the teacher sort of floats around like a little butterfly from group to group and sort of helps out where needed. So that's one thing that Paulo Freire suggested is this problem-solving pedagogy. Yes, let me make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't think we did. Okay. Oh, I did miss something. One of the things that has been happening in the United States for, I'd say, the past 30, 40 years is students don't want to go to school. Have you seen this phenomenon? There's many reasons, I think, why this happens. Especially this is true in middle school and high school, I think. But one of the reasons that I've been reading about in my research is that students don't want to go to school because especially if they're struggling academically, because they feel like they have no reason to be there. Because the only thing they're sort of there to do is to learn and take these standardized tests. What schools have forgotten about is the importance of social emotional development and learning, bonding with others, learning to read the emotions of another person and learning to understand our own emotions and how those two things connect. I know this sounds really sort of touchy-feely, but studies have shown that it's vital and it's really good for students who aren't doing well academically to have those social emotional bonds with other students because that gives them a reason to go to school. It gives them a reason to enjoy school. So if we're having students work with each other in small groups, they become friends with each other. They form bonds with each other. And so rather than thinking, I don't want to go to school because I might see Dan Darling, he might say something mean to me, instead they're saying, hey, I'm going to school because I'm going to see Mary today, and she's my super nice friend in my English class. So it gives students an anchor to hold them there, I think. Maybe even our students will fall in love and get married. Who knows? Every good things can happen when we get students talking to each other. So that's the problem-solving part. It does a lot of good stuff. Let's talk about something called liberation pedagogy. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, liberation pedagogy. The idea of liberation pedagogy is that we want to, that traditional hierarchies separate academia from real life. So when we go into a classroom, we are learning the class material. And then we go out into our life, and we have a life, and these two things are separate. And oftentimes we can't see how they blend together, how they should inform each other. But why else are we going to school if we're not learning about life? So one of the problems that I think higher education has, and probably K through 12 has, is oftentimes we don't connect what's happening in our classroom to the lived, real experiences of our students. So I can teach my students all day about writing, hey, but how does that relate to my real life? You might go to a political science class and study, the Constitution. How does that relate to, my real life? And so one of the things that Paulo Freire said we need to do is we need to make deeper connections between those two. We need to make it so school and life are inherently connected, not inherently disconnected. And so what he says is, let's connect these two worlds, let's bring them together. Let's encourage students to bring all that knowledge that they have, all those values that they have, all that experience that they have into the classroom. And let's see what it does when we mix it up with the material that we're teaching. For example, in a political science class, I think that's a great moment to study how our personal lives are influenced by politics. One of my colleagues at Normandale teaches in exactly that way. That instructor will try to help students see the connection between when they go home and watch the news media, how that is a political moment, and how the news media tries to influence the way we live our lives, right? Or the education system, he claims, is a political institution. And so if we can see the political science in the education system as we're sitting in class learning, that's a powerful moment. That makes students aware of how politics is sort of radiating through our world, not just in the classroom in a textbook. So this collision of things is really important to Freire, and I think important to me. What we want to do is we want to break down those ivory tower walls. We want to let the light shine in from these students' lived experience. Yes. The final thing I want to talk about before maybe we can have a nice conversation, all of us together, is revolutionary pedagogy. Yes. I was looking up images for revolution, and they're all very violent. So then I Googled peaceful revolution, and I got that. And I was like, okay, we can use that image. So we often think of the word revolution as some sort of violent overthrow of a government or status quo. But Paulo Freire was not using it in those ways at all. He was using it more of a metaphor to upend the hierarchy. The traditional hierarchy in classroom is the teacher has all the power. Students have very little power. And what Paulo Freire said is, let's give students a lot more power and take it away from the instructor and see what happens. That is my go-to, by the way. Whenever a class is not going well, whenever my lesson plan didn't work right, my go-to move, I'm going to give power to my students. I'm going to make them do more and sort of marginalize myself. And it almost never goes wrong, my friends. So, the revolutionary pedagogy says, let's upend hierarchies. Traditional hierarchies are oppressive. I'm a privileged person. I'm a white male, and I grew up the son of a lawyer, so I am also socioeconomically advantaged. When I get to be at the front of a classroom and hoard all the power and say, hey, I know everything and you know nothing, you got to listen to me and do what I say, I'm like re-privileging myself, wouldn't you say? And so the job of the liberation pedagogy or revolutionary pedagogy is for the teacher to try to get rid of that power and privilege and give it to somebody else. Another thing the banking method does is it tells the students that one type of person is superior to others. At Normandale Community College, I don't know how it is across the board, but in the English department, we have like 35 faculty on average per semester. It's a lot. And we have, out of that 35, usually 1 or 2 faculty of color, faculty who are not white. So almost all of our classes are led by white people. Hey, nothing wrong with that. I like us. I like myself. But the problem is that if I'm teaching in this banking method and saying everything I think is right, my values are right, my culture is right, my religion is right, my identity is right, that's white supremacy. Straight up, white supremacy. Because it's telling the students that I'm superior to you. And most of our students these days, I teach almost only developmental education. So that's classes that are below the college level. Almost all my students are students of color. So in that dynamic, I'm teaching them white supremacy, which is disturbing. And this happens across many of our different schools in this country. There's many classes where we only have books written by white authors. I was reading this book called Whistling Vivaldi. Anybody read this book? It's beautiful, written by Claude Steele. And it's about stereotype threat and how when people have stereotypes in their heads, it makes them perform less well in certain situations. That's sort of a tangent, but one of the things that he said in that book is that in a lot of situations, he was talking about African American students particularly, but he said that a lot of times when African Americans go to university, they have all white teachers, all the books are written by white people, all the music they hear is music that's preferred by white people. It's this white hegemony. It may be unintentional, but it's still there, and it's still extremely harmful. So what we need to do is we need to change that. Paulo Freire would argue, and I would argue as well. So when we use revolutionary pedagogy, what we're doing is instead of having this dynamic where you have one person up here and a lot of little people down here, you form a circle where everybody shares power. The teacher becomes a student. The students become teachers. Students teach each other. Students teach the teacher also hopefully teaches the students every now and then, that would be good. But then we can have this more give and take relationship where students' ideas are valued, students' culture is valued, their ideologies are valued. And this brings me to something else, is that one of the things that's good about this more circular metaphor for a classroom where we all sit in a circle and get to know each other and treat our ideas equally and exchange ideas, is that it helps the teacher to get to know the students a little bit better. And I think that's crucial, is the more we get to know our students, the better we can help them, the better we can be mentors to them, friends to them. One of the things that happens, I think, as we get more educated, as professors get more educated, and as we have this power in the classroom, let me check the time to make sure I'm not going over. Boop. I'm not texting anybody, I promise. One of the things that happens to us is that we start to feel super important and super smart. Doesn't it happen when you have authority, when people respect you, when people call you professor in the hall? It makes me feel really good about myself. It makes me feel like I have all the answers. And so my tendency might be to amass that power and think that it's okay for me to sort of deploy it rather than relinquish it. And what happens in that situation is that I start to think I'm more important than anybody else in the room. So that means I talk about myself a lot. And I might talk about my students less or ask them questions about each other less. That means I don't know my students as well as I could. But if I see power in the classroom, if I let my students do most of the talking, I get to know them really well. Let me give you an example of this. So I had a colleague once, on the day one, their practice was to have each student think up a question to ask the professor about themselves, about that professor. So each student would have to go around and say, where did you grow up? Or what do you love about your subject? Or what's your favorite sport? And by the end of the class, they sort of all knew the professor, but what did that do to the power dynamics in the room? Yeah, it made the professor the most important person in the room. I think better are my colleagues who do icebreakers where the students are telling each other about themselves, where they're exchanging ideas and greetings with each other, and the professor sort of fades from the scene. What I love, what happens sometimes, is my students ignore me. That's a happy day for me. Oftentimes I'll have them working in their little groups or something, and I'll be like, okay, it's time to get back together and talk about this subject, and they just totally blow me off. Because they're having too much good discussions together, right? This is a good thing. We want this. Because, let me ask you a question. How much, I'm one person, and I have a lot of knowledge and understanding probably. How much do 25 people have? Is that probably more than me? This is a stupid question. But that's it. Yeah, please.
Wisdom of the crow.
Wisdom of the crow.
The
crowd.
The comedian
The
tends
crow.
to be more accurate than any one person.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Do other people agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah. So we are totally. Go ahead. No. Yeah, please. Could you repeat that, my friend?
In a group of people, when everyone has an estimate, the median tends to be the more accurate than any one person's guess.
Yeah. Can I tell you something similar to that? So my brother is a professor of astrophysics, And he did an experiment once with one of his big lecture halls. They have those clickers, click, 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 where the professor can ask a question and then the crowd responds by clicking what the answer they think is right. So he asked a very difficult astrophysics question. I don't know what it was because I wouldn't understand it anyway. But so he asked this question and he had students think individually and then click their answers. And like 30% got it right, 70% got it wrong. And then without telling them which answer was right, which answer was wrong, he said, okay, now talk to your neighbor and discuss your answers and then click in. And there was a reversal. Even two students who got it wrong the first time, when they talked to each other, they came out to the right answer. So this backs up what you're saying, the wisdom of the crowd. We do much better in any space when we have lots of people contributing as opposed to one. And that's one of the basic principles of revolutionary pedagogy. I want to make a special note on equity. I noticed y'all, this is like Justice Month or something. That is so cool. That is great. That makes me love this place. So we are striving at Normandale and I think across the country for more racial, cultural equity. We want people to have equitable chances in life and in school. And I think that one of the things that Paulo Freire does is allows us to set the stage for equitability, because it says that no matter your race, no matter your culture, no matter your language, no matter your nation of origin, no matter your gender identity, you bring something valuable to the classroom. And what we need to do is we need to welcome these things into the classroom so that it becomes a much more diverse sort of amalgam of ideas and values. And so I think this gives us a unique opportunity as teachers to do that. Let me give you a few just examples of how this works, I think. So I used to assign more specific writing prompts, like you have to write about this thing. We're going to read this book together, and I want you to write an essay about this book, which is a fine assignment. But what I decided after a year that, I don't know, I just wanted to be better, I decided let's open it up and let students write about whatever they want. So I'm going to say, hey, I want you to pick one of your core beliefs, and I want you to write an essay about it. I'm going to guide you through that. We're going to do research so you can find experts who agree or disagree with you. And I got a bunch of eye-opening essays on Islamophobia in high schools. This is something that I know nothing about. This is something I could never teach in my classroom. This is something I would never think to bring up. But from that day forward, I think about it all the time. So my students taught me something huge about their lives. And this is also a political issue. This is a cultural issue. There's so many aspects of Islamophobia. And so that's just one example of where bringing my students in, giving them power, has done a miracle for me as a person. But I also feel like they got heard. They had an academic space where their life mattered, where somebody was listening to them, where somebody was listening to their problems and taking them seriously. And on top of that, when they started doing research, they were like, wow, tons of researchers care about Islamophobia. So not only is it me and the people in my culture, but there's people doing research about this because it really bothers them and it really is a big problem in our society. So it validates this terrible experience of maybe they're being bullied in high school and says, hey, this was not your fault. That's part of the healing that we have to do sometimes as educators. We have to heal students who've been damaged in the education system often. Okay, I think that's it. To sort of sum up, and then I want to open it for questions, is that for me, Paulo Freire's teaching philosophy in a nutshell is that students should matter more than teachers. An ideal in a classroom, teachers sort of vanish and students take the stage. So, thank you for listening. I would love to have questions or discussion at this point. Yes, please.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we need microphones?
Could we pass microphones? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Sorry for the improv, if you weren't prepared for that. We have, the folks on Zoom will appreciate the microphones especially. Thank you.
Sorry, I sort of sprung that out of nowhere.
First and foremost, thank you so much for coming down today and speaking. You are one of my favorite topics at church thus far.
Thank you. Thank you.
Little things about me. I did spend some time in the police department. I work for NCS Pearson, which is the education company we're doing a lot of focus on DE&I right now, as you could probably imagine, given the state of affairs. I do have to bring up one little point, though. Under problem-solving pedagogy, you said putting people together in groups. How many of us in here have been in a really bad group?
Yeah. Yeah.
So even though the model might be better overall, it's still not a perfect system, because you're always going to have this group of hierarchies within an individual classroom that will or can sometimes put down the minority. And this is speaking from personal experience by being a person of color. So just thought processes for everyone to sort of chew on. It's not as simple as flipping the system. You have to really, truly rebuild it from the ground up, along with acceptable behavior within society.
I like that. Thank you. I agree totally. Yes. Oh, let's wait for the mic. Sorry. I keep jumping the gun.
One of my best classroom experiences was where the whole class got stack ranked by engagement level, and the high engagement students got put in a group and the low engagement students got put in a group. Almost all the low engagement students complained to the dean.
What do you think? Do you think that was a bad choice or a good choice?
For me,
Yeah.
fantastic choice for the whole class. For the whole class, it certainly left some without the conclusions that I came to.
Were you part of the high engagement group?
I was.
Okay. Yeah. I find that, do you want me to respond to that? Sure. I find that to be a little problematic. Because one of the things that sometimes teachers do is dismiss students that they see as low achieving, and they mistake that for not caring. Some of our students who are not doing so well, it's not because they don't care, it's because they need help. And oftentimes an inspiring peer can lift them up. And so I think that the best practice is to mix different types of students. I mean, especially because a lot of times I think we'd see the high achieving and the low achieving students maybe being racially segregated. And to me, that is kind of like a criminal educational practice. We need to mix people of different types together, but also different achievement levels, because those high achieving students can teach the lower, quote unquote, lower achieving students, and maybe get them more inspired and to care about the material a little bit more. What do you think of that? You think that's good, okay. Does anybody else have thoughts? We have a couple other hands.
I don't know if this is, can you hear this? Not on. It is on, okay. This is really just a thought as you were talking about some of these distinctions and these different approaches. I also have a law degree, and it made me think about the Socratic method, which is how, for anybody who doesn't know, is how usually law school is approached. And the Socratic method really involves, nobody's going to give you the answers, and you are expected to sort of, I mean, I would say it forces you to think differently for yourself. And I've often thought, why isn't there more of that in the educational system generally? Why is it limited mostly to the law school setting? And if I had a question in there, it would be, to the extent that you're familiar with the Socratic method, where does this overlap with this philosophy, or where does it get differentiated?
Thank you. Well, I think that the Socratic method values exchange between teacher and student. And it really places a value on students challenging teachers and challenging ideas and having a dialogue. And so I think that's really good. Am I getting it right so far? Yeah. Yay! Yeah, so I think that's good to have this sort of back and forth between teachers and students. And that creates an environment where students feel open to challenge the teacher, which is really good. One of the things but we have to mix dynamics in classrooms. So that couldn't be how it's done every day, where all of you sort of play ping pong with me about ideas, because that privileges quote unquote extroverts, students who are more comfortable speaking in large groups. And I feel like we need to also break into smaller groups so students who are more introverted are more comfortable to speak. And I've noticed that a lot of times we're talking as a whole class, there's students who never speak, and then they're the most outspoken and thoughtful ones in the small groups. So I would say yes to your value of the Socratic method, but just we need to mix it up a little bit. But yes.
Dan?
We have
Dan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a question well, something that you brought up that I thought was extremely important was the idea of students getting to know each other. And I think at the beginning of a semester or at the beginning of the school year, kids getting to actually say each other's names, introduce themselves to each other, and say something important about themselves really will make a difference. And I think that idea about groups having the dynamic where there's a power dynamic at work might break down if students really understood more about each other and that time was taken at the beginning of every school day for students to actually get to know each other every day.
Brilliant, I love it. Yes. We have a few people up here.
We have about 1 more minute, so let's do 2 questions and then we'll be done. Thanks.
I have a quick comment and then a question. The comment is the best exam I ever had in college English was write your own question and your own answer.
Brilliant.
That was so much fun. The question, when we talk about students, and I do this myself, I often refer to them as kids. And no longer categorize myself as a kid, I realize that I am missing out on a lot. And in the education system that I was exposed to and my kids were exposed to, they were always in the same basic demographic. And how does that work out? Because it would be I would find it fascinating to be able to bridge some of those age boxes that we put ourselves in. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that word kid is super important to avoid. And every now and then I slip and call my students kids, but I try not to because, that is a diminutive form of address. And it creates that power dynamic. I'm an adult, you're a kid, I know more than you. So I agree that we need to change that dynamic. And I think that happens naturally when we stop talking and listen, and also allow students to set agendas in classrooms, allow their ideas to take precedence and ours to fade into the background. I think that makes people feel more mature and more like adults. And also I think if you give students responsibility, that makes them feel more mature and more like an adult. So I feel like that helps a little bit to bridge those gaps. I also try to get my students to call me Dan instead of Professor Darling, which sounds creepy. And it takes them a while, but eventually they call me, so they start out calling me Professor Dan, and then after a while they're just like, hey Dan, and that I think helps too, is a form of address.
Thank you. Leslie Swenson. So I love your ideas, and I think they're good, and I used them when I could, but I taught when it was junior high, and we have state standards. And you better perform and teach all those state standards because your school is tested on those state standards. And so giving students time to discuss things and whatever, that's really good. It takes up a lot of time, however, and you're really under pressure to finish the entire curriculum. Question. That's my question.
I guess you're wondering what I would do about that or what my opinion of that is. Well, I think that system is flawed. The standardized test system is flawed, where we're teaching to the test instead of letting teachers do what they do best, which is teach and create classrooms where knowledge is exchanged. So we got to change that system. If you're locked in that system, there's not a whole lot you can do about it except for do your best to use this pedagogy when you can. But I think the more we use it, the more we get students to care enough to sit through our boring lectures sometimes. So if we do have students engaged in these small groups to the extent we can, then that will invest them more in the material so they care maybe a little bit more about the tests, although that's hard to do because tests are meaningless. But, excuse me, yeah, it's a tough situation. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you able to stay for coffee?
Definitely.
Yay. Okay, I think we have the choir now. Thank you.
I'm inviting the choir up here to join me in singing a song that I hope that you will sing with us. It's a Leah Morris song. And I have to admit that when I was looking through her songbook, I stumbled upon this one, and I had an imagining that it would be sung sort of in our community nights. It would be a call to dinner kind of thing. And I had a whole vision of that sort of being our way going forward. And then I read her note at the bottom of it, and I thought I'd add some more meaning to it, which is that Leah says this isn't a religious or political statement. The song was written for her CD, Promise, which bridged the gap between her Baptist and atheist parents. However, in 2020, it felt important to reframe the message with an awareness that the US and the White House belong to the people. And I wanted to just offer that meaning and see also maybe if there's some meaning that you might find for yourself in this song. And so actually also, maybe what we'll do is we'll sing it one time through in unison so that they can hear it. And then we would love for you to just try and follow and make your way along with us. Sound good? Okay. One, two. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. Peace for all right now. Ready? We invite you to stand if you're able, or to sing it or feel it in your body. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. Peace for all right now. Truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. Truth for all right now. Oh. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. Love for all right now. Why don't you stay up there?
Will you join us in the chalice extinguishing as soon as everybody's settled? Sorry. Okay. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.